Well, welcome everyone to the Lunch and Learn program, Common Interview Questions. This session is really critical because even though everyone's going to be interviewing at different firms and have different interviewers, there are a set of questions that happen over and over and over again. And we want to make sure you're prepared for it, that you've thought about it, and we're going to talk about some good and some less good answers. So I think everyone knows me. I'm Eric Lee. I am very happy to be joined by Rich Carson, who's a fellow faculty member on the accounting side. So the audience is both tax students and accounting students, so we're going to be talking about both areas. So I'm going to give my background, and then I'll let Rich introduce himself. I worked in public accounting for 20 years. And during those 20 years, I was always very active in recruiting. I was a lead campus recruiter for a couple of campuses when I was at KPMG and also when I was at Deloitte. And I also was involved when I was at BDO. But to me, the experience that I got that was most valuable was for 10 years, I sat in what's called debrief meetings. And in those debrief meetings, they sit and they talk about all the different candidates. And they talk about, gee, this candidate said or did this. And that was impressive or that was not impressive. So I'm going to talk a lot about that as we go through these common questions. Rich?
Yeah, some of you have heard this before. I've got a little bit more gray hair than Eric. I survived 35 years in public accounting. And while I led global practices for PwC, I was also actively involved in the area here in the recruiting and HR functions and had direct responsibility for recruiting in some of the Southern California universities that we recruited heavily from. So I've been there and done that in the recruiting context, on campuses in the office. And much like Eric, there were a number of scenarios where we were actively involved. In fact, as practice, we were actively involved in a meeting that occurred after the office visit days at about 3 o'clock in the conference room. And everyone who had interviewed a candidate had been invited into the office, sat in the room or called in, and we discussed, if you will, each of you that were there that day, and we decided whether we were going to make an offer for you to come join the firm. And if I was the assigned partner to your interview, I would probably call you by phone that day and make an offer to you over the phone. So that's how quick some of these things happen. And every bit of input that you give the recruiter and the recruiting team while you're in a campus interviewing setting or in the office is shared with the rest of the group in that 3 o'clock meeting. So how you handled yourself, how you handled yourself during a meal, a social setting, in the office, what kind of questions you asked, all of that stuff is shared so we can make an informed decision on what is a very compressed opportunity to get to know you. So we'll go through some of those things, and I think that might be helpful in the whole game.
Yeah, and I think the first good news is when you get an interview, somebody likes you there, at least the recruiter, right? Because they reviewed your resume, reviewed the cover letter, and they like you. But you do not have the job yet. Doesn't matter how high your GPA is. You've got to perform well in the interview. So I want to start with a little game. I know a bunch of the people in the room are eating. Put down your food. Very simple game. It's called Simon Says. Okay? If you're not familiar with this game, it's very simple. If I don't say Simon Says, don't do what I say. If I say Simon Says, then you have to do exactly what I say. Make sense? Very easy. I'm sure I won't fool any of you guys. And you can do this, those that are on video. I won't know if I fooled you, but you can do it as well. So the first thing is take your right hand and raise it high in the air. Good. No one. Oh, my goodness. What's wrong with you guys? I said you have to say Simon Says. So Simon Says, take your right hand and raise it high in the air. Simon Says, make a little OK sign, putting your thumb and your index finger like this. Simon Says, take it and press it against your cheek. Simon Says, hold it. Simon Says, look around. Who knows where their cheek is? Not many people. Cheek's up here. Simon Says the game is over. The point of that exercise is, even though it was very clear I said to do what I say, well, some of you even raised your hand even when I didn't say Simon Says, because you saw me raise your hand. But even after that, and you got the flow of the game, you did what I did, not what I said, because my body language was actually speaking louder than my words. And that happens in the interview setting as well. Okay, so you need to be just as concerned with your body language in an interview as the words that you say. And that's the subject of our first slide.
Yeah, good point, Eric, because this is going to be an intense situation. You've interviewed for jobs before, very likely, but this will be a very unique interview. Why? Because of the extra preparation you're doing to get to that point. Your adrenaline's going to be running. You're going to realize it's a compressed period of time. So you're going to be doing all kinds of things that you and I don't realize we do normally. You know, all of this, right? All this funny stuff we do when we get nervous. To Eric's point, just think about that. You're going to be watching the interviewer, hopefully, not looking up here, over there. You're going to be paying attention, trying to make eye contact, trying to demonstrate that what you're there for is a serious business, right? Obviously, I think you've talked about, or you appreciate the greeting, you know, the confidence that you demonstrate, even in a handshake, your smile, your positive attitude, you know, sitting up straight, you know, you kind of come in dressed properly. You got to keep that eye contact because human beings get that warm, fuzzy feeling when you're prepared to look at them and you don't shy away, okay? Story I shared with Eric yesterday, one of the worst experience I had in recruiting was up in Alaska, where I spent about 6 years, and we were in a very small interview room in Fairbanks campus of University of Alaska. And to the point later about not being distracted, young lady spent most of her interview time sharing with me how she had just broken up with her boyfriend. Didn't work. I wasn't there interested in her personal story. I was there talking about a future opportunity, a future employment deal. Don't get distracted by anything. Personal affairs, the fly on the wall, what the guy walking by the window in the interview room did when he walked by. Don't pay attention to the interviewer, okay? Your full emphasis should be there. There's a nice quote. Enthusiasm spells the difference between mediocrity and accomplishment. Be enthusiastic, okay? Don't walk in saying, I'm doing this just because I think I have to do this. Well, the interview is going to come to a very abrupt end, and it shouldn't. You should take advantage of this, because even if you don't get a job offer, it'll help you prepare for the next interview, right? So you should do as many of them as you can.
And I think that's a really important point. Being enthusiastic, being focused, being engaged during your interview is a key. Look at it this way. All of you will come in and you'll interview with like 6, 7 firms. And in your mind, you probably will think before the interview that these are my top 2 firms. What I challenge you is the way that you behave and the way you conduct yourself is the exact same with the first 2 firms as what you think is the 6 and 7. One is those may swap once you go through the interview process and you meet people, but also you always want to put your best foot forward and face forward.
So the point of the avoid the fidgeting. Avoid the demonstration you're uncomfortable. They know you're uncomfortable. Take a deep breath. If you, in executive presentation skill training that you hopefully either have had or will take someday, they talk about how a 5-second break in the conversation seems to you to be a lifetime, but it might make the difference between coming across confident, relaxed. Take a deep breath. If let 3 to 5 seconds pass, collect your thoughts and respond and engage. Okay? Don't, go a mile a minute. You don't have to cram it all in. You've probably done some homework in advance, and during the conversation, they'll get a feel for who you are and how you act. Okay?
So we talked a little bit about those debrief meetings. Don't be one of the people that they talk about and say, that guy that plays with his pencil, remember, him, the girl that plays with her hair, those type of things they notice, and I think that's where practice comes into play. So by practicing your interviewing, the people who are interviewing you will be able to let you know if you have some of those tendencies. Well,
and as we get through the presentation, we'll talk about preparing questions you might have for the interviewer, right? If you've got them on a piece of paper, don't be doing this while they're talking, right? Yeah. Or while you're talking. So, commit a few things to memory that at least prompt you to ask a question. If you want to make some brief notes, fine, to remind yourself of those things. But don't be preoccupied with, this is a conversation, right? Your resume will set the stage, and then your personality, your confidence, your passion should come through during the one-on-one personal interview, right?
So you've heard me say over and over this concept of Copal C. Those are the 6 things that we think that the firms are looking for the most, and we wanted you to include it in your resume. Now you want to make sure you communicate that through the interview process. That's communication, organization, problem solving, ability to learn, leadership, and client relationship skills. So don't just say you have those skills in the interview. Make sure that you have examples that support that you do have those skills. So tomorrow, KPMG is going to come in and talk about behavioral interviewing. So we're going to talk about, I think there's probably 10 most common questions. We're going to come over just 8. We're skipping behavioral interviews because we're talking about that tomorrow. That's when they say, tell me about a time that you showed leadership skills, that you worked in a group, that you showed that you can solve a problem. You know, those type of things. We're going to talk more about that next week. Also, anything that's in your resume could easily be a question, right? Tell me about what you did at this job. Tell me a little bit about what you did at this organization. Those are softball questions that you should be completely prepared for. The 8 things that we're going to talk about today won't cover those 2 areas. So I want to make sure that you prepare yourself for those 2 areas. So quick comment about that. All right, so the very first thing we get to talk about is basically, why are you here? Why tax and why audit?
Now, obviously, you made a decision, or you wouldn't be spending all your time here racking your brain over this subject content, right? To go somewhere into this profession, into tax or audit, right? But when you think about it, would they ask you a question why you're here, why you're doing this interview? I mean, what are they looking for? Think about it. They're going to ask you, why are you sitting here in this interview? It's very likely to do that. And should you not be prepared to explain to them whether you have a passion about it or whether you're just, looking for a job, okay? So
what do you guys think? Why? Why are they asking this question? Someone speak up.
They want to know if you're, if you do have a passion, if you're dedicated to your choice of career.
Yeah, for sure. Well, you think about it. They've got, I don't remember what the numbers are now, but between the campus interviews and the in-office interviews, the hatchet comes out and knocks the numbers down quite a bit, so that the people coming into the office, any one of the firms, are a far smaller portion of what they interview on campus, right? So if you demonstrate the confidence and the passion in the on-campus initial interviews, you're likely to make that cut into the office, right? If you're not demonstrating that, someone else that does will get the opportunity to visit the office. That's the bottom line of it all, right? And it's all then what you do to convince them that you're committed to it, passionate about it. They also, by the way, don't want you to come in the door, train you, which costs a lot of money, and then have you take off. So if you're passionate, you're committed about having a career in public accounting, tax or audit or whatever, advisory or forensic, they'll get the feeling that you could conceivably be around a while, develop an expertise, develop as a professional, create a value proposition for the firm, create happier and many more clients. All of those things will build over time. That's what they're ideally looking for. Do they think that everyone coming in the door is going to stay forever? Absolutely not. They realize that. But if you're one of the 500 people that come in at the bottom of the pyramid and you're the only one left of the 500 and they need you to be a future partner, they want to make sure you have the passion to be a future partner, if that's what your goal is, right? Here's an example we gave. Well, it's a tax focus, but I'll flip an accounting focus in there. You know, truly enjoyed learning tax law and understanding the theory behind the law. But most of all, I enjoyed being a trusted business advisor. When I volunteered at TaxAid, I got an opportunity to sit down with clients, with people having issues, whatever the story is. Tell a story about the passion, where you found it. It might also be a friend or a family member who's into this profession to explain to me what's involved in the profession. I got a passion from that. I saw their smiling face and their success and their advancement and their travels and the kinds of clients they worked on, and it caused me to be very interested. That's my story. I was a pre-med student and I changed the business on the back of family members who told me how exciting the business could be. 35 years later, with a lot of gray hair, I decided to do something else. But it's going to be something. Tell your story, how you get passionate, where that passion comes from, but demonstrate that through the interview. Don't just say it and forget about it. Be lively, be positive.
Should be a really easy one for this group because you already made a commitment to either get a master's of accountancy or a master's in tax. So you can talk about what made you do that And also, now that you're here, you've gone to a bunch of lunch and learns. You've had a lot of great professors. And maybe some of that has even confirmed your commitment and excitement about either tax or accounting. Okay, so the second one we want to talk about is why public accounting? What makes you interested in public accounting? This is very similar to the why tax question. They want to understand that you have done your research, that you understand how it is set up. For me, I think that it's really good to be able to comment that you know the industry, right, in answering this question. So on tax, and I'll let Rich talk if he wants a little bit on the audit side. On tax, you say, well, you know, I know there are options to work in a corporate tax department. There's an option to work in government. But I really like the experience that you get in a public accounting firm where I would be able to work on a variety of different clients and a variety of different issues. I also enjoy being a trusted tax advisor and helping, and I don't know if I want to be on the other side of being more of an adversarial relationship if I was working with the government. Anyway, you're telling a story and you're giving an example and being able to explain that you know the industry and you know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I'd agree. Many of you in here, and particularly on this side, have heard my story. I don't do much tax work, never have in 35 years, and I kind of avoid it even today in my admission for the day. But on the accounting side, I got more into advisory services and consulting and operations review, even in an audit context with major global clients. That really was exciting and really was mind expanding, because you looked at situations you never dealt with before. It's much more than debits and credits. Okay, it really is. And if you don't understand that yet, you should do some research. I did have a recruit at UC Santa Barbara years ago, probably this is now the mid-90s. Young lady signed up for the interviews. One of her family members had a close friend who was a partner of mine in Tokyo. Was encouraged to go interview. She sat in the meeting. In the first 10 seconds of the interview, she asked for a moment so she could clarify she knew nothing, but rather little, about public accounting. She was told by a family friend to interview. She had some, well, she had the curriculum, but she really wasn't focused on getting in public accounting. Long story short, she's still with the firm today. She was one of those contrarian things I'd done over 35 years to give her a shot because of what the rest of the interview presented in the way of a candidacy for her, and she's very successful in the firm today. So it's not like it's an end-all, be-all, but I'll tell you what, today the competition is probably a bit different, and if you're not prepared to demonstrate it and just tell your story about why you think public accounting might be a great place for you for all your own personal reasons, it's probably not going to connect for you early on. You should do that and do it confidently.
And similarly to what we said, why tax or why audit, I think to the extent that you have a story to tell, that's great. Again, I think it's easy with all the different lunch and learns and the different professionals that you're meeting. On the tax side, that public accounting tax panel, which talked about what public accounting was all about, you can talk about any of those experiences and how that attracted you to the public accounting experience.
All right. So, you expect this question? Tell me about yourself. Do you think an interviewer is going to ask you that? Some of you have heard this, and I know you've heard it a lot in some of the other discussions you've had. Every moment of the day in the business world, you're selling yourself, right? And if you don't accept that, you're probably in the wrong space, because you are. The elevator chats are important. Getting to know people, sharing with them briefly who you are and what you're made of. This interviewing, if it's a half an hour, 45 minutes, hour, whatever it ends up being, is a sales job. Right? Starts from your resume, goes right up to the time you shake hands and say, thank you for your time. I look forward to hearing from you at the end of the interview. It's a sales pitch, right? So they're going to ask you, what are you selling? That's what that means. What are you selling? Tell me about yourself. What do you bring to me specific to the job opportunity, okay? Where you see yourself going. It's not just, let me in the door, show me where the facilities are, show me where the coffee pot is. It's where do you see yourself going? Sell yourself about the opportunity you're presenting to me in this interview is great for all these reasons. You could say, but make sure it's consistent with your story about, and many of you have that story already. Maybe you're changing your focus. Maybe you've done something else in your undergraduate degree, maybe getting a master's in tax or accounting, pursuing another line of career. So it's a natural step stepping stone effect, right? You're going to next step in the development of your professional career. So you can do that. You can talk about the jobs you've held that get you to where you are today and where you want to go. And this is a natural evolution of that process you've designed for yourself. If you can do that quickly and convincingly, you've told the recruiter a lot about you. And what they're going to do is they're going to convert that to what this person's going to do within the firm. They're going to start out as the lowest level of staff. They're going to push themselves to advance and expand and learn and develop and help the firm along the way. But you want, in the process, to have the recruiter see you naturally fitting into that role. So some of us do it naturally because we're, BS artists. Some of us, it takes some work to present that, but so you have to practice. You have to tell your story, practice it on your friends and your family to be able to answer, who are you? Okay? And then make sure that whoever you're saying you are is demonstrated by your resume. Right? This is all a connectivity. Not like all the interviewers or auditors. Some of them are professional recruiters that are hired by the firms and engaged by the firm, but they're going to compare the information and connect the dots and make sure that the story you're telling them is supported by your resume, your job experience, and all that. Okay? Keep it short and sweet. If you had a family member or a mentor somewhere along the line that kind of helped frame who you are or help you kind of set this stage, share that with them. What's going to happen? You're going to be working in, some of you have heard me say this, public accounting is a team sport. You're rarely going to be working by yourself. You may be doing some research, but you're going to be working with other people. So getting mentoring, getting advice from people, and all that is a good message to send the recruiter as well, that was a helpful thing in your life. Okay?
So look, I hate this question. I only have it listed because it's asked. But when I was an interviewer, I never asked this question. But it's there for you to think about, to make sure you are prepared for, because the worst thing that you can do is not be prepared for this question, and you can give a very long, rambling answer. I go back to the basic of the fact that everything that you say in an interview, just like everything listed in his resume, is supposed to be relevant to you getting the job. So you're not going to answer this question, well, I was born in, in Southern California, and in preschool I did this, and So, but I literally have heard those stories that people have said that. So I think it is similar to the elevator speech. Yep. We're going to be talking a lot about the elevator speech, because you're going to need that when you meet people in the career fair and at these networking events. So I'm just going to hold off and go without going into detail of that because of time concerns. But just to kind of note that this question, you can incorporate your elevator speech, which you will be working on in future Lunch and Learns. Okay. So then number 4 on our list is, where do you see yourself in 5 years? So they may even say 10 years. Why are they asking this? Yeah, they want to know a little bit of your future career plans. I think they're looking for whether you have any goals. I'm sorry? Ambition. Yeah, and ambition. Do you know the industry? So, I have had candidates who have basically had a 3.9, 4.0 GPA, who aced the interview, more or less, except for this one question, and they didn't get the job. Because their answer was, well, probably I will be just finishing up law school at that time in about 5 years, and I'll be looking for a job in law. It's like, whoa, wait a minute. So, your answer should be consistent to your true career goals, but also to the fact of in the light of what that company would like to hear, to put it simply. So
the other thing they might be expecting of some, certainly on the accounting side as well as tax, but as you get that experience and you get the exam out of the way and you get the sign off by the firm that you've done all the experience requirements for California licensing, there is an expectation of a lot of staff falling off and looking for other jobs somewhere. Don't get into that typhoon. If you convey to them that you don't have a 5-year plan, they're going to default to the fact all you're there for is to get a license, get a couple of years of experience, put a stripe on your resume, and you're off somewhere else. And that won't play well for the overall interview. Okay?
Whether you're in audit or whether you're in tax, the firms don't make a lot of money on you in the first year. They make money on you down the road.
Like 5, 4, and 5.
Yeah. So should your answer be strictly about business? And versus like, like, oh, I'd like to have a family and, advance my career and buy a home. Like, what about those kinds of things?
No, my answer would go back to keeping it relevant to the job. So I think it should be about business.
Yeah, I'd emphasize that. I think they assume that, we're humans. We're all going to change things. And in fact, even if you were to ask, we'll talk about international assignments and whatnot, some of the people that ask about those, your personal life changes rapidly. So you might think today you want to do an international assignment in 5 years. Well, watch your personal life change in those 5 years, and you're probably not going to be in a position to want to have that as a high priority. So it's not taboo, but it might take time away from other more important discussions. Yeah, I'd stick to the business side.
So, they know the story. They know that there's a lot of attrition in both the audit and tax side, right? But they want people who are coming in with an open mind and seeing how it's going to work. They don't want someone who's already has a plan to leave after they get certified or to leave after they get 2 years of tax experience so they can go to law school, okay? So there's a couple of very good answers to this, which are listed here. I'll read them real quickly. I'll read tax, and I'll let Rich read the accounting one. In 5 years, I want to have earned my CPA license, received a broad exposure in individual, partnership, and corporate tax. I want to have developed these technical and soft skills to be a trusted tax advisor, manage engagements, and develop less experienced professionals. The only thing that's missing in there is I might say, my goal would be to be a manager at that time. And so I think that shows that I have all these set clear goals. It's in line with what the firm would like to see me do. And that's a really good answer to this question.
Yeah, I'd agree. And where you start really making the firm money is, frankly, in the 3 to 5 year space, because a lot of training they're going to push at you early on. You're going to be learning on the job. You're going to be learning in classwork and everything else. And so when somebody comes at 2 years and says to me as a partner doing HR work that they want to go seek a job somewhere, I try to get them to stick around. One, it's selfish for the firm's benefit because they're going to make more money if they stick around another couple of years. But at 4 and 5 years, you're managing multiple engagements, you're supervising people, you're developing people, and your experience, confidence, professionalism gain ramps up geometrically. It's amazing what you can do after 5 years experience with a firm in an interviewing context versus 2 years with a firm. So everybody wins. So my usual argument is to pound the drum that 4 or 5 years is a minimum. So I'm looking for that 5 year plan when I'm interviewing you. And in the audit or accounting side, it's very similar. You certainly should say you want to be certified. Don't steer away from that. That's a goal. You should want to do that. And the firm will push you to be certified. Why? Because they want all the professionals to be certified. No doubt about it, right? So that should be a goal. Varied experience accounting and auditing issues, the technical standards that are out there, because you have a lot of exposure now, but applying them with a client is a bit different than reading them in a textbook and applying them in a classroom when the client's breathing down your neck, okay? Begin to develop an industry and technical expertise. These days, it's all about industry and technical expertise. You never know who you're going to be working with, but the fact of the matter is, if you look at how the firms come together, they often come together because they're looking for a technical expertise they do not have. And you should be part of that value proposition somewhere later in your career. So that should be something you should bring forward. Multiple engagements, building client trust. Client trust comes up in both of these. Why? Because that's the value of your professionalism. If the clients trust you, they're going to call you, they're going to pay your fees, they're going to ask for your firm to be involved. So, frankly, if you want to take some pieces out of here, just demonstrate that in all the interview interaction you have. Okay? So, this is an interesting one. All right. So, it's not just a recruiter grilling you under the hot lights in a small room with the temperature turned up, with your man in a stiff chair and you're uncomfortable. You'll feel that way. But at some point during the discussion, they're going to ask you if you have any questions. Be prepared. Don't do this, right? Think about some questions on the top of your head. Here.
This is the only question that I can guarantee you will get. Every interview they will ask you. So you have to be prepared for this.
And much like the others, why are they asking it? What's it demonstrate if you have some questions? You thought about it, yeah. Maybe did some research. You might even know what the firm does, what kind of clients it serves, what its expertise is, right? So if you went to a firm that got merged into KPMG, Rothstein Cass recently, right? If you went to them, what would you expect them to be in oil and gas? Would you expect them to be in utilities? They are in investment management and hedge funds, deeply, right? So it demonstrates, if you have a question about their practice, that you actually have done some homework. And it's not just that you say passion and interest and commitment. You've demonstrated it by getting into their game a little bit. And it will win you some points and may well give you an opportunity to pursue some of the things, all right? They also want to know if you're even the least bit prepared. The interviewers can usually tell fairly quickly when you walk in the room if you, one, are overly nervous, if you appear prepared, for a lot of different things, lots of signals. But if they ask you a question, do you have any questions of me, and you come back with something, all right, and we'll talk about some things that you might ask, some things you might not ask. There are some things you probably don't want to bring up during the interview, all right? And it's stuff that you'll talk about with them in some other context, but
I'm just amazed how many people really do say that. No, I'm fine, no questions.
Yeah. Yeah, don't go back on stuff they've asked you and kind of retread. Now, if on the other hand there's something you didn't say and you can position it in the way of a question, all right? And we'll go through some of these in a minute, but the do not ask, let's cover those first. Okay, the interview is for you to demonstrate who you are as a person, the salary, the benefits, you know, how many hours you're going to work, or those things you'll be talking about in some other venue. Don't take the time to ask those questions. Those are separate discussions. That's not even up to the recruiter generally to even be involved with. So focus on whatever time it is, 30, 45, 60 minutes, whatever you have, on who you are. Sell the commodity, sell the person, the future professional first, and then the other things will come, and you'll be able to talk about that at a later date. But don't take your time spending that. The recruiter will probably write a red note in there that they're more focused on those. And what does that demonstrate if you're more focused on that? That you want a job. Okay? Now, we could debate it for a month about whether it's fair to ask those questions or not, but the fact of the matter, it sends the signal you're more interested in what you're going to make and how many hours you're going to work than you are the longer-term professional ambition. Right? So leave it to the ambition side. The others will come. All right? Is there another one? Yeah.
Question?
Yeah. So in a previous Lunch and Learn, someone said that it's okay to ask the same question of multiple levels of people in a firm. But since everyone comes together, is it seen as a positive or negative if someone says, oh, well, they already asked me that question in another part of the interview?
So I would say you'd separate it. When you do your campus interview, you're only meeting with one person, right? So when you go to an office visit, you're meeting with several different people. And I would say it would depend on the question. If it's a question which you would want different perspectives on, then I think that's fine. But if it's, if it just looks like you're just asking just to ask a question, that is seen as a negative. It's like, so how does your firm train new staff? There's no reason why you need to ask 4 people that, right?
For instance, let's assume I'm interviewing you on campus, and the 2 of us are sitting in an interview, and you ask me about whether there's an open door policy in the firm, whether you could have access to me if you had a question or had difficulty at some point. And I gave you the answer, right? And the answer would be yes, but you'd say, well, wait a minute, is this really true? You're going to ask the staff when you come in the office. Do you have access to partners and managers, senior managers, when you have issues? And do they respond, and is the door open? You're going to ask that question of them, because not that you don't believe me, but you want to get some validation of the question and the answer, right? So yeah, that's fair game. If it's just a repetitive, you've got 6 questions and you just crank them out for everybody to talk to, they're going to detect that.
The thing that I get, students will in previous years, they'll stop me in the hallway and say, Eric, I need to know what some good questions are to ask in my interview. My first thing is to say, well, first of all, they should be questions that you are legitimately interested in knowing. It should be not about just what questions I can come in. Stop and think about what would you want to know. Think about what will help you make a decision between the different firms that you are interviewing for. So I still think the best question, it goes a little bit about how a reporter or a news reporter is the best that's interviewing, is that if you're engaged in listening to the conversation, you can ask a question about something that actually was a follow-up. Usually interviews start with them talking a little bit about their background. And if you're really interested, you find out that that person's an international tax manager. You said, I know you mentioned you're an international tax manager. I'm curious, when did you make that decision, and what helped you make that decision that you wanted to specialize in international tax? If that's something you're legitimately interested in, that's a great question. Yeah. It shows that you were paying attention to something they said, and then you were asking a follow-up question.
So if you're able to pay attention, right, you're not nervous, you're not fidgety, you're relaxed, focus on what's going on, you're focusing on what they're saying, and you're taking advantage of every bit of information you get, right? And, you know, as stated here, it's a great opportunity to help yourself stand out, to demonstrate, you know, what you're thinking in the interview. You might have an opportunity in asking the question to get clarification of things that they have said, right? And if you didn't get clarification at first pass when there's something they said or something, you ask them. Ask about the firm. You know, one of the best questions to ask is, you know, about the firm's culture. How do things work around here? And I think one of the things that I really like people to ask is, how can I be best prepared my very first day on the job? Okay, now, you know, if the recruiter says you ought to go to the library and spend the next 3 weekends, you know, studying and that's not what they're going to tell you, but they might help you be prepared. There isn't a whole lot of preparation necessarily for your first day, but it might be an insightful question. You might ask about where they're sourcing their people. You know, this is obviously a global business these days. It's not a local business anymore. You might ask those questions. You know, how does your recruiting work? Just get interested in the conversation here. You know, find some questions that will just keep the conversation going. Remember, it's a team sport. They're going to look to whether you can be comfortable in the front of people you haven't met, in a setting not unlike that, in a client's office, in a new team setting with people you haven't worked with before. And everything you do during the interview will set the stage on their evaluation of whether you're capable of doing that. All right? So ask questions, because you're not always going to be there just listening. With your ears open and your eyes closed. You're going to be involved in the exchange, and so here's an opportunity to do just that. If there's lack of clarity on the job offering, you know, if you need some clarity there, ask the question. The recruiter's going to go in thinking that you're there, you've applied for the job, you understand fully what's involved in the job, but you might not. So ask for that clarification then. So when you leave the room, you know what they're looking for, and you've given them everything you can give them on whether you can fit their job opportunity. That's your objective. Okay? Go for it.
Okay. So the next item is, what is your greatest strength? I happen to think this is a real softball question. People ask it in a variety of different ways. They say, why should I hire you? My last question always when I interviewed was, I'm meeting a lot of applicants. What distinguishes you, or what might set you apart from other people that I'm meeting? That's your opportunity to start bragging. So you should know what the strengths you want to highlight. You also can think about the job description and what strengths what skills they're looking for, so you can match your skills to that. Of course, you want to back it up with facts. You know, what's my greatest strength? Good communication skills. Next question. What? You're not communicating well, right? But it says here on the slide, it's like, I'm good with customers. I enjoy the challenges of turning a dissatisfied customer into a satisfied one. Just last week, I had an experience when, da-da-da-da-da. So you go into your story backing up your assertion that you have that's a strength. So here's some good examples. Not surprising, a lot of Copal C is on here, but there's a couple other things I think are good examples of strengths. You have to, of course, make sure that your strength is true. So you need to pick the ones that are relevant for you, the one that you want to say. And I want to comment something that Rich said earlier. He said that an interview is a conversation, which is really true. So we didn't talk about how interviews start, so I wanted to say a little bit about that now. When you start your interview, a lot of times they handshake and they start to talk to you. How's your day going so far? How's your classes? Generally, that's a little bit of small talk. You should stay consistent to whatever that interviewer is doing. So they're talking small talk, you should be able to converse. One of my friends told me the story. He said, "Eric, I cannot believe this candidate I interviewed with. I was just kind of chatting him up, and he said, 'So, did you get a chance to look at my resume?'" Like, what? We were just trying to work into the conversation and make it easy. So you need to be comfortable having those initial conversations, and then generally the interviewer will do the lead. The interviewer will then lead into the resume, might start asking you some basic questions about, are you interested in tax or accounting? Are you interested in the San Francisco office or the San Jose office? And then start asking about your resume. So be comfortable with that. Anything on the greatest strength you wanted to add?
Yeah, I would say I highlighted the one on perseverance and stress tolerance. You know, there are going to be times in anything you do with any of the firms where you're going to be challenged. I don't know. Sad to say, I think I do my best work when the pedal's down and the challenge is the greatest. I think humans do generally find other energies to bring to bear, but that's not what they're hiring you for. But there will be those times. So if you have a situation where you demonstrate that you've worked hard in this coursework, for instance, okay, and survived this and did well, that's a good sign. Commitment and ability to learn new information and skills. You're going to learn every day. It's not going to stop. It's going to change in its form and content. It's never going to end. So if you can get those kinds of things across on things that you've done well at and you can see yourself continue doing, because ultimately you're going to end up training others as well, and they want to get a feel for that. Problem solving. Obviously, the CPA exam's taken a little different proposals. It's going to take a different focus. More and more, the firms are going to try to figure out if you can solve problems rather than just retain and regurgitate technical knowledge, right? After a few years, you're going to be thrown into some situation, even in accounting context, that are more problem solving than it is debits and credits. And it's audit issues. How do we get through this? How do we get through the financial statement disclosure issues? How do we get through a tax return preparation issues where the client's pushing on this side and the rules push us this way? Those are problem-solving situations. So if you have some strengths there, you can demonstrate. That's probably a win-win if you can put that in their conversation. And obviously, they're counting on you being a reliable and self-motivated employee, right? So if you have some situations there you can talk about, those are all good things, right? Remember, they may never have met you before you come into that interview, right? So that's why I say this is sales from start to finish. So lay it all out. But be honest. Anybody in here think they're perfect? Show of hands. Anybody in here perfect? A couple of you heard me say, I'll be perfect when they put me about 6 feet under the ground. I'll be perfectly gone and expired. I'll never be perfect. And I'm going to learn every day. You're not going to be perfect. You're going to have weaknesses, right? They may not be things that you put on your resume, but be upfront. If you have some things that you feel you can work on, particularly if, and why would they be asking this actually? Let me ask that. Anybody have a sense on why they'd be asking you about any significant strengths or weaknesses you might have had? Why would they want to know?
How well you understand yourself and how you're working to improve.
Yeah, the answer was whether you really understand yourself and whether you have a good view of yourself. That's really important because being aware of who we are is really, really critical. Right? We know when we look in the mirror and we got the makeup on, the hair done, and the clothes on, we know what we look at. But we don't know how people perceive us. So if we have perception issues we're dealing with, we need to be honest and deal with those, because it's the whole person they're interviewing, not just that little person that they want. It's the whole person they're interviewing. So you tell them who you are. You don't need to bury the interview by tipping the scale, tell them all the nasty things you think about yourself. But be honest and be upfront, because they do understand you're not perfect. Taking a strength and turning into a weakness. I work too hard. Those, they see through that kind of stuff. Come up with something genuine, and it may be that you're continually working on social settings. Maybe you're continually testing yourself to be comfortable in settings where you know everybody. Working with whatever it is, kind of get something on the table so they can see that you're a really honest human, right? And you're balanced. The rest of the thing here. One of the strategies in an example here that we put on the slide is, acknowledge a mild weakness. In this case, I've been reluctant to delegate. I've had to reevaluate this and creating a bigger workload for me because I'm not willing to give it to other people. And that, if you haven't ever done that, takes a talent and some risk taking to delegate to other people, right? It's things that you think you should own yourself. But that's exactly what you're going to do fairly soon after you get in the business, is delegate to people. I assign each person a specific manageable task and then follow up to satisfy myself it's being done properly. This seems to work well. Bravo. That's exactly what you do. And if you're continuing to work on it, tell them, I'm going to continue to work on this. This is something I believe is important to me, and if you capture something like this, it's going to be really important and valuable to them, and tell them what you're doing. And put it as a work in progress, right? They will help you do that, by the way. And when you get evaluations every 6 months or whatever the time frame is for the individual firm, they'll comment on whether you can delegate, whether you can communicate, and all the things we're talking about. So tell them up front that you understand those things can be improved. All right?
So I just think that's such a critical thing. So it's a huge pet peeve of mine and many others when you don't give a real answer, but you mitigate that by saying, I've worked on it and here's how I have improved. So you're actually turning a real weakness into a potential strength because you have acknowledged it. Why do you want to work at the company? So this is our 8th and final one. You know, we talked about why tax/audit, and we talked about why public accounting, and now this even delves even more detail. Why do you want to work at this company? So why are they asking this question? Yeah. Did you do the research? Do you understand the industry? So you wanna be honest. Let them know that what you know. I think what's critical there is to be able to share personal experiences, right? So, you know, you met someone at the Lunch and Learn, you met someone at the business practice luncheon, you got a chance to talk to them, and you really felt like it was a great place to work, and the variety of experience that you get, and you're very excited. Please don't go over the top, though. Don't tell a firm that you're their #1 choice, because it looks really silly if you decline their offer. But you can say you're very excited about the potential of working there, right? I think you should show enthusiasm. You should show excitement. Just don't go overboard. So we've now gone over 8 common questions that you're going to have. I want to comment a little bit about what we didn't say was there, and it was purposefully because I don't think you see it much. Technical questions. Very rarely, if ever, for a staff position are they ever going to ask you, tell me about the tax law, okay? So therefore, there's no need for you to start talking about it and trying to impress them with your technical skills, right? You know very little, no offense, relative to those in the business for a long time. They're not looking for someone who knows a lot. They're looking for someone who's willing to learn, right. But they're looking for someone who they want to work with, right? Who has a good attitude, who's considered their goals. So in this last slide, some kind of final thoughts. You want to make sure that, one thing about our business, public accounting, whether audit or tax, you spend more time with the people you work with than your friends, than your family. So the people who are recruiting are asking themselves, do we think that this person is going to fit into our firm, right? And then secondly, do we think they'll do well? Will they be successful? So that goes back to the enthusiasm. I think being pleasant, smiling. You may have just come from a horrible midterm that you took, or you're having a bad day. Become a good actor or actress, right? You're smiling, you're pleasant, you're not slumped over in your chest, you are on for this period of time where you are interviewing. I think that practicing is so important. You need to know these common questions. I think what I hope you've gotten a big thing out of today is you need to look internal and think about all the experiences you have and the stories that will back up the assertions you're going to be able to make. So you can think about your resume. The other thing is the expectation of the recruiter is you know your resume. So you're not saying, oh yeah, what was that I said that I did? That you can be able to speak and talk about what you did without looking down at your resume. So I think those are kind of the key things I want to leave you with.
When you mentioned resume, there's a couple of things that come to mind. Oftentimes when I'd go into a recruiting thing, I may get the package 20 minutes before you show up, let's say, and I'm looking through it. I'm looking at gaps in employment, if you're working while you're going to school, frequent job changes. I might ask you things about that. Looks like you change jobs often. Kind of let's talk about that. We might use that for information to kind of get a better idea of who you are. So do know your resume, right? Understand what's in there. That's your sales pitch, right? Is your ad, if you will. Understand what's in there and be able to talk about it. If they're looking at GPA, undergraduate master's program, and there's some understand why that is and how you could explain that, okay? And as I mentioned about international exchange and all that stuff, be realistic when you go in there. I've interviewed direct admit managers and partner candidates. It's different, to Eric's point. We talk about industry expertise, industry depth. We get a feel for detailed stuff. You're one of a number of people that are going to have interviewing for a job. You have the base knowledge in place, the educational background, accomplishment in place. They're looking for where you're going to go in the next 5 to 10 years, frankly. That's really what they're looking for. They know it's going to take a couple years to get you settled into the profession, but they really are looking for you to generate some value for yourself and for the firm 5 to 10 years from now. So that's your goal, all right? But it starts with your resume. It's got to be relevant to your conversation. You've got to emphasize it. And then you've got to sell yourself for whatever time they're willing to give you. And your goal should be to get past the first interview and be invited back to the office, right? You never know who you're going to work for. I don't know if I told this story. I don't think I told it here, but there's a young lady that was one of the cohorts that wanted very much to be in the Big Four, and I couldn't quite get her to clearly tell me why she wanted to be in the Big Four, but she thought that was hitting a home run. Okay, fair enough. But there's lots of good firms in this area. Lots of good firms, all right? So why do you have to focus on that? She went to work with a small firm. As an intern, they offered a full-time position, and then lo and behold, they were acquired by one of the Big Four firms. You never know who you're going to be working with. So the idea is engage with a firm, get the confidence, get the professional credibility built, and then you'll have an expertise that will be valuable to someone somewhere in the future. That's the bottom line. All right?
Yeah, and to that point, it's such a small community.
Yeah.
So you want to be professional. You want to be able to put on a good face no matter what. There was a gentleman who interviewed with me who we thought was excellent when I was at KPMG, and he got an offer from Deloitte and KPMG, and he chose Deloitte. And but he handled himself really well. And but guess what? Then I moved from KPMG to Deloitte later in my career, and I was actually the manager on one of his jobs. So he ended up working for me anyway. So you never know who you might end up working with. So I'm going to just give my final thought and anything that Rich wants to say, because we're getting up close to 1 o'clock. Just know that I think you have 2 steps in preparing for your interview. One is know your resume, know your own experiences, know basically what your selling points are that you want to do in an interview. And then the second step is to go out there and start practicing. Obviously, you can practice with these common questions. As the Career Services has said in their presentation, there's so much online that we offer at GGU, practice questions for you to do that. But I think you literally need to practice one-on-one with family members, with fellow students, and literally have them be able to make different comments about how they thought that you did. So any final comments?
I just say, when you talk about the enthusiasm and the confidence, really carefully evaluate yourself. If you're generally a confident person, you might, kind of turn that back a little bit. Turn up the confidence and the aggressiveness during the conversation when it makes a point of value to your position. Don't try to control the conversation necessarily. We talk about it's your time to sell, but you're not selling used cars, right? You're selling yourself. So be yourself, right? Don't oversell, don't overconfident, don't over emote, right? Be yourself, be professional. If you can practice with some people a lot, I would underscore that repeatedly. And get out of some of the street chat that we use on a regular basis. And you don't have to be so rigid and professional to be uncomfortable. But try to leave the college tongue off to the side. You know, use a professional language. Practice with somebody how you're presenting yourself so it sounds like you come across as a professional. In the recruiting game, we've actually laughed about some of the Sunbelt schools that, you know, get pretty loose and crazy with how they chat with one another, and it comes into the interviewing setting and it doesn't work. And we're afraid they're going to act that way in front of a client. So, you know, just sell yourself well. But look, this is really a longer-term proposition you're trying to sell yourself. And just focus on that. And I think if you put the pieces in and make it relevant to your resume, you should do just fine. Do as many interviews as you can do. Okay? As many. If for practice, if nothing else, all right? That's all I can tell you. Just hit the ball out of the park. You're capable of doing it.
All right, we've given you the advice. Thanks very much for those on the video for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
All right. Thank you.